Welcome to the BPD Bunch Brunch, where we get together with our favorite brunchy beverages to catch up, play games, and talk about all things BPD. I'm your host, Sanny, and today I'm here with Melanie, Selene, and Katya. Where in the world is everyone coming from, and what is your brunchy beverage?
I'm in Toronto, Canada, and I'm drinking coffee.
I'm in Dubai, UAE, and I'm drinking sparkling water with lemon, cucumber, and mint.
Ooh.
Fancy.
So I am from the West Midlands in the United Kingdom, and I think it's squash that I have in here, but I just thought the mug was really cute. So yeah, this is purely just so I can use the mug.
Oh my. I don't know, my brain was trying to do the letters and the words at the same time, and then it was had a shutdown. OMG! There we go. That's what I was trying to do. I am coming from New Mexico in the US, and I'm drinking coffee. Today we want to chat a little bit about dealing with slip-ups and regressions on our recovery journeys. If this and other BPD-related topics interest you, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that you do not miss anything. Who's got some thoughts about this topic?
So I think for me, when I started out in recovery, I had this really idealized view of what recovery was going to be like. And in my head, it was, I was going to start on recovery. Everything was going to be absolutely fantastic. I didn't even factor in the possibility that it might go wrong. And I thought it was going to be on a set time scale, and it was going to be linear, and everything was going to be great at the end of it. And I would get a little trophy with, "You have recovered." Well, obviously not a real trophy, but in my mind, there's definitely the end goal. And I was going to have something to say, "You have reached recovery, you are now normal." It hasn't really worked out like that because I think I just didn't really consider real life at any point in that. And definitely along the way, there's been some slip-ups and some things that have happened that have taken me off course for what it was that I wanted to do or what I wanted to learn. And rather than dealing with those the way that I do now, I would catastrophize, I would blow it out of proportion and think, "Oh my God, I've ruined it. That's it. I'm never going to recover." And it would just go from wanting to recover and being really motivated to just completely demotivated and self-sabotage, and considering actually just being like, you know what, I'm never going to recover. What is the point? So it's definitely been a journey with a lot of ups and downs, and I definitely saw a lot of the black and white thinking while that was happening.
Yeah, it's wild how much that black and white thinking, I feel like, is one of the things that really hangs on for a really long time. Even when, so for me, as somebody who's very externalized in my expression, the priority originally was kind of to, bring that down so that I wasn't acting out and lashing out so much. But it took a while to realize, oh yeah, I'm applying this black or white thinking pattern to my recovery as well. It's like, if I'm not this perfect robot person, I am a total failure.
Yeah, it was really relatable what you said, Katya, literally everything that you said. And especially around the initial stages of recovery. When I started therapy, when I first got my diagnosis, I had this preconception that, okay, I'm gonna get fixed now. Almost like I'm a car and I'm going in and they're gonna change my parts, and then that's it, I'm gonna be fixed. I'm never gonna say have a panic attack ever again. I'm never gonna engage in self-harm ever again because I'm gonna be fixed. It's gonna be done, dusted. And especially I think a DBT program that I did, they talked about graduating from DBT. And that word graduating, I think, also played in my mind. You graduate, it's ta-da! I got my diploma, just like you said about the trophy, right? This is it. Now I'm fixed, But I realized, I was never broken in the first place. And I struggled to cope with the world. And yes, I could acquire different skills and lots of different ways, but I wasn't there to be fixed, So I see it differently now.
As So Len was actually speaking, we aren't broken, but this is a message that can get pushed down into us. And when we're feeling perceived, we have to be perfect as humans. And so what happens is we go into doing mode, where we start to activate this constant urge to do more. But the irony is that you don't need to do more. You actually have to lean into just sitting and being yourself. And we're not taught that. A lot of people aren't taught that it's okay just to be yourself. And so I've learned a lot of my healing is recognizing that I'm allowed to screw up and that it's perfectly okay to feel shitty, just really crappy some days.
You said, that it's okay to be yourself. And I think for me, there's a yes and with that, in the sense that, especially if you struggle with your identity, it's like, who even am I that it is okay to be that person, right? And I think I often confused my emotions with my identity. I felt completely justified in acting out and lashing out because I thought I was that's what it meant to be an authentic self, was to just let my emotions bleed out all over everyone all the time. And it's taken me a really long time to realize that it's more nuanced than that. It's not that your emotions are not a part of your identity necessarily, but they also don't make up your entire identity. And, how you choose to express how you feel and how you choose to regulate your emotions is also a large part of who you are.
I would definitely agree with that. And I think as well, one of the things for me when I was starting out in recovery was I had no role model for recovery. So when I was thinking about what recovery looked like, I wasn't necessarily thinking about what recovery looked like in BPD. I was associating it with other things. And I feel like at the moment as well, we do live in this culture of almost toxic positivity where when you are recovering, you are bombarded with messages saying, you've got to work harder on recovery, or recovery looks like this and recovery looks like that. And if you do this, then you're not recovered and you're a bad person if you do this. But if you're a good person, you'll do this. And there's just so many mixed messages because actually you don't really know what applies to you as a person. And there's so much pressure to get it right when you don't even know what right looks like.
Yeah, I didn't have any role models either. That's why I turned to a lot of reading memoirs, books, I was trying to figure out is there, how do I make sense of this and how do people live with BPD longer term? So yeah, that's super interesting. I wanted to reflect on the point around emotion versus identity. And I think this is somewhere where the English language does not quite help us, because for me, emotion is something we have temporarily. So imagine if we were able to say I have sadness or I have anger rather than I am will be I am creative. I am, I'm French. I mean, that's a fact, So identity for me is I am, and emotion for me is I have, but that's not how we use it. We say I am angry, which indeed is then super misleading. So it was just something I was thinking about.
Well, it's funny because the English language does have not identifying with emotions. We just don't use it. I feel angry. I feel that. I feel happy. I feel sad. Right? That is the technically accurate way of talking about emotions, but none of it, for some reason, we don't do it that way, which is interesting. And so in DBT, I remember that was one of the things they were always reminding me to do, is to, say I feel instead of I am.
And then I was thinking about the perfectionism side of things. It's still something that is difficult for me. I was raised in a culture, and I know a lot of cultures are this way, so it probably relates across, most of our, I suppose, modern world cultures. But yeah, in France, you can never get A+ or the full marks, 20 out of 20. We get grades out of 20. You can never get 20 out of 20. That's not a thing, because it's never perfect. You always have to improve. And that's the schooling system. You can never be perfect. But I always tried for it anyway. But then I integrated this message that is never good enough. And so in my mind, it's either 100% or it's like 0 to 99.99999, and that's basically failing, and you're a failure and you're a piece of crap, and you basically need to not be here in this world because you're not good enough. And similarly, like I used to think about like, I need to change the world. I need to make the world a better place. Like otherwise my time here is pointless. And that sets you up for like massive unrealistic expectations and cognitive dissonance, and obviously a lot of the symptoms that's, you know, I then experience.
Why don't we go around, describe a time that you slipped up and how did you manage it?
I think for me, slip ups can feel really big and small, where I feel like I'm not back to the beginning, but I feel like I have these shame spirals. I have shame around sometimes sending messages or texting people, or sometimes impulsively feeling like I should be farther along in my recovery. As we say, these shoulds come. And I always say I'm shoulding all over myself. Like it's like you're shitting all over yourself right now, Mel. Where it's similar to what we've been discussing with splitting, where it's like, oh, that second where I could just reel it in, where it almost is like a vacuum or this wave comes over me and I'm like, hold it back in. But it's this safety behavior, funny enough, where I want to get that reassurance from that person that everything is okay. And Zanny has said to me beautifully in the past, is there something more effective or we can be skillful in this moment, right? What's really happening? And what's really happening is in that moment, I'm wanting reassurance from external forces, but it's really just a reassurance that I'm okay. And the truth is, I am okay. It is okay, you know? And so what I do, and what I'm trying to say here, is that I'm either over texting, overextending, trying to get an answer, trying to get control in a situation that doesn't need that in that moment, right? It needs space.
My one is around the fear of abandonment. My husband travels quite a bit for work. He goes to Saudi, so he's going like next week. And yeah, I'll be like, please don't go, please don't go, please don't go, please don't go, please don't go. And yeah, I just, when like, even like the night before he leaves, like I'm struggling to sleep, like I feel like my stomach is in knots. I just feel like I can't be alone. I can't do this. Like, am I even safe with myself? You know, what am I gonna do? Like, how am I gonna like manage to get like go to bed and not overeat and not engage in some behaviors because no one's there? And you know, and that's also like that fear of like being alone and lonely. And yeah, that's still something that I struggle with. Like I find it really hard. I find it easier when there's someone around, like even we don't necessarily have to talk, but like if I feel a presence, I kind of, it helps me to want to be the recovery version of me, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's still a tricky one.
Yeah, I would say mine is probably still around impulsivity, which is probably not a major shock if you've seen a lot of episodes that I've been in before. So it's really difficult with impulsivity because as soon as it comes into my mind, I don't necessarily always have a tendency to rationalize it, especially depending on who I'm around at the time. And I think impulsivity still happens, but it's a lot different to when I was younger because I've got much more of an awareness of consequences and danger, so I don't take the risks that I used to take when I was younger, but I still don't always think things through the way that I should. And I do find that when I am impulsive, I really do beat myself up about it because I feel like, oh, that's it, like I've regressed, I've gone back to how it was before. But actually, I'm looking at 2024 through a 2004 lens, and actually the impulsivity that I'm engaging is different. So I have learned from it because I'm not putting myself in difficult situations. I'm not deciding it's a great idea to go for a run at 2 o'clock in the morning in really dodgy parts of the city. I'm going paragliding, for example, but that is a controlled risk. So even though I've decided to do it right at the very last minute, it's a different kind of risk. So although I am still being impulsive, I can still recognize that I've grown from that. So I don't feel as guilty about indulging in those kind of behaviors, because although to me they still feel wrong, they're healthier than they were. Sometimes with borderline personality disorder, it is slightly unrealistic to completely try and abandon those symptoms altogether. And sometimes it can actually be more detrimental. So what I've tried to do over the years is embrace the symptoms, but in a really sensible way. And it doesn't always work, but as you get older and you have more responsibilities, you kind of have that obligation to yourself and also to the people around you in terms of looking after yourself and managing your condition properly. And like I said, it doesn't always go to plan. Like, you know, there are times when I am impulsive and I don't do it in a healthy way, but it's happening more often than not that it is done in a managed way.
I would even argue that if you're expressing symptoms in a healthy way, they're not symptoms anymore. Because what makes something a psychological disorder by definition is that it is psychologically impairing and causes significant distress in like multiple areas of life, right? So at some point, that impulsivity, the dangerous impulsivity, becomes like fun spontaneity. And even people who don't have a diagnosed mental health condition will sometimes make dangerous, impulsive choices because they just weren't assessing the risk that well. And I think part of the challenge with this is that we're really hard on ourselves. We think like, in order for me to be recovered, this has to be completely gone. But like every single symptom for BPD, even the suicidality and self-harm, all of those things are normal human things that are blown out of proportion. Like this is one of the things I learned in school, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know this, that like it's pretty normal for someone to entertain a suicidal thought when things are really difficult. Somebody in a healthy mindset, for example, might have the ambient thought like, oh gosh, like I wish I wasn't here. But then they might think, oh, but if I wasn't here, then I wouldn't get to do this, or this. And they sort of talk themselves out of it, right? Like it becomes disordered when you use that and it fuels you forwards, like, and then you start making plans, you start actively hurting yourself, right? And I'll be honest, I don't even know if what remains in my body could be categorized as BPD anymore. I really think of myself as someone with ADHD who used to have BPD, and sometimes, you know, maybe has like a mini BPD flare up. But usually when that happens, it's because I wasn't taking care of myself. Like I've had 2 episodes. And for me, an episode is a time where I end up engaging in dysfunctional behavior as a result of an intensely emotional situation. There are only 2 times in the last year that I had what I would really consider an episode. And they were both times where I was physically vulnerable. I was experiencing some kind of physical illness or impairment of some kind. So like one of the more recent episodes was a day after I had been drinking. And when I consume alcohol the next day, I find that it makes it very difficult for me to regulate my emotions more effectively. I manage it by taking ownership of my behavior, but also recognizing the things that I need to be more careful of in the future. And so after that day, I had a sort of a sit down with myself, and it was like, okay, Zanny, you either need to be more prepared for the day after you drink. You have to cope ahead. You have to recognize that the next day you're going to be more emotionally sensitive and you need to have your skills ready to go, or you can't drink. End of story. And so like I have drank a few times since then, which has only been like 3 times. I really don't drink that often, but every time it's like, okay, tomorrow you're going to be more emotionally sensitive. So whatever people tell you, just sit with it. 3 days from now, you can worry about it. But until then, just don't go there.
Yeah, I think you're touching on a great point in terms of like the after. And that's a big difference for me. Like the way that I talk to myself after a slip up or even during is the biggest change. It's still something that I struggle with, but it's very different. Like I used to be like the inner voice, right? So harsh, like just, you're such a failure. I can't believe you're so broken. Like, oh my gosh, like if people knew what happens in your head, like this is so embarrassing. You're a horrible person. You're disgusting, you know, so much shame. But when I look back, I'm like, because I wrote a lot about these things and I read for recently kind of like the, you know, at the worst, at the highest symptomatic point, I was reading it. I never explain in any part why I'm so ashamed, why I think I'm such a horrible person. I never say. It's just like almost like a fact. Whereas now I really try, it's a conscious thing. I have to be like really conscious and deliberate to notice like, ooh, you know, my inner voice, my inner critic is very awake today. Like, what is she trying to do? What's her purpose? You know, is she trying to protect me in some way? Is she trying to keep me safe? Or is she scared about something? Like, what's the emotion that she's carrying and like trying to tell me about it? So really just like being more aware, but also editing as much as I can, like, you know, just reminding me of things like, hey, I'm human. Like, okay, I engaged in this behavior. Do I really want to engage in this behavior? No. Did it happen? Yes. You know, does that undo everything that's ever happened in between? No. Okay. Can we, you know, tomorrow try something different? Like, yes. So just really like the aftermath is different than it used to be. And I feel like that's one of the major turning points of recovery for me.
I think the aftermath is like a key defining feature of recovery for me, because I think like what Katya was saying in the beginning, the whole like when you have a slip up, it's like, oh, I'm just going to throw the whole thing out the window and self-sabotage, and what's the point of even trying? Recognizing that not being a perfectly stable human is never going to be the goal, not because I was diagnosed with a psychological disorder, but because that's just the state of being a human. We all have limits, right? And if I get pushed to my limit, I'm not going to handle that well. Even if, and not that that's other people's fault. Sometimes I push myself to my limit, right? And in those moments, having the self-compassion and being like, I didn't sleep last night. I drank last night. I wasn't practicing my skills regularly, and that's why this situation makes sense, given X, Y, and Z. Here's what I can do to move forwards, right? I think that changed everything, because it used to just be one episode just basically goes on forever, because whatever work you did up to that point, just throw it out the window. It's like, nope, I'm done with that. I tried, I give up. And it's like not giving up after you have a slip up is like the thing, you know?
I just wanted to ask, like, how do you know? Like, how do you all answer that question when you have maybe a strong emotional reaction or you engage in some behavior where you're like, hang on, is that human? Is that disordered? Like, how do you answer that question? Or how do you even explore that question for yourself?
To me, it's 100% based on my behavior. I refuse to believe that being emotionally sensitive is a disorder. People are born with different ranges of emotional sensitivity. And to me, it is all about how I manage that emotion. So if I engage in a dysfunctional behavior, I usually consider it when it's like extreme. Is this actually like psychologically distressing and impairing? Like, is this actually really high? And then it's disordered. And if it's not, then I'm just a person. I think also like observing other people. I don't know about y'all, but like I used to be so obsessed with myself, always focused on my feelings and how I'm doing with you. And I started listening more to other people's stories. And then it became a lot easier for me to realize like what is sort of the average human experience, because there are all these people who didn't have like severe mental health disorders talking about issues that they're going through. And I'm like, oh, I've been experiencing that and thinking like I'm having some full-blown BPD relapse, but I'm not really. It seems like a lot of people are very emotion phobic. We all are afraid of our emotions and afraid of other people's emotions. And if you feel things, like there's something wrong with you. And I don't know where that idea came from, but so I guess it's not that easy. Like it took a while to get there, but now it seems a lot more obvious because I spent more time listening to other people. And when I started paying more attention to other people, I was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with everyone.
Similar to how Zanny does, like she uses words like For me, maladaptive, things that are hindering my recovery. I know when I'm spiraling. I know when things start to get activated. For example, when my period comes, all hell breaks loose. Get the heck away from me, right? So I'm not human. I'm not anything. I'm just angry, irritable. I'm not Mel. The risk, I guess, factors for me is my stomach starts to hurt, and that's most people. I start to get irritable with my husband. I feel sensory things like noises, get away from me, things people say, do, social media, there's lots of things, but that's some of them. I don't have as much patience. Like you mentioned, the plea skills with DBT, which is the vulnerabilities of things. I really need to check all of those double time. Getting enough sleep, getting my food intake, all of those things. Because if I'm not, I'm even worse than before. Like, all hell breaks loose. So those are definitely Mel signs. The period's a big one for me.
So Len, were you asking about how do I know if something is sort of disproportionate compared to somebody else?
Yeah, like how do you know, or how would you go about figuring out if you're having a BPD moment or if you're having like a human moment?
For me, I kind of use a bit of a barometer, because I would say that most people in my friendship circle have borderline personality disorder, which then makes it really difficult if you're trying to judge your reactions amongst your friendship group when actually they're probably not really going to see anything wrong with it compared to how somebody who doesn't have BPD would see it. So I think for me, it's really simple, and I kind of use the cost and benefit principle. So if I have done something and I'm not sure whether it's down to my BPD or whether it's just a normal human reaction, I look at the cost to me and the people around me versus the benefit. So if I've done something that I know has hurt other people, I don't necessarily compare it to what somebody in the general population would do, but I kind of go against my own moral code. Has this negatively impacted on the people around me or on myself? And then the flip side as well, if I do something and I'm not sure whether it's been a good thing to do, has it benefited anybody, so me or the people around me? Because I do appreciate that the people who are in my social circle, as lovely and as wonderful as they are not necessarily going to share the same views as somebody who is not in that friendship circle. So I have to have my own measure for what is acceptable and what is not, based on how my actions are impacting the people around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really similar.
I
mean, I haven't put it into cost benefit, but I like that wording.
I think it's so useful. Yeah, I will definitely use that. Yeah,
it's very economical. Sorry.
Very logical.
Yeah, but I think it's so useful. Yeah, I've used the future self aspect. Like, how would future Solène, the person I want to become, continue to grow into, how would she feel about whatever it is that I've done today, yesterday, etc.
I love that. I love that too. Ooh.
Yeah, but I love the cost benefit. That is really cool. I'm definitely going to use that. Thank you.
Tick boom to both of those ladies.
Yeah.
Love both. I was doing this Tony Robbins thing once, and I swear I was like, really? But this was important because sometimes we write out mantras a lot, just mantras, affirmations, but I started learning about incantations and this program with him. And with incantations, you're supposed to yell them out loud. And it's funny because with incantations, they're supposed to come from your body. And you're supposed to, and I work on this sometimes, the way you say it out loud from you authentically means something. So I'll literally, I know this sounds dorky, if no one's around, I'll do it outside sometimes if no one's around, but I do it mostly in my own privacy. Say the affirmations I want to say, but I'll yell them very strongly. So if I think about something I want to think about, if like, I am strong, but I'll say it very much, and if it's from my gut, but it actually will get you in those moods because it changes your physiology. So I know that's a different side thought, but it actually helps.
I believe that it helps. I'm making a weird face because it just makes me uncomfortable.
There's research around this, I swear. I know, I'm looking at you and I'm like, but there is research around it because a lot of people have trouble with affirmations and just writing out mantras. Like, I'm not feeling anything. There's no change. But there's actually the physiology. When you start saying it out loud, similar to if you think about what you're thinking about, before you say it, it has that similar change. So sometimes when I'm nervous or I have anxiety about going somewhere, like social anxiety, I'll start saying things in my car on the way there, like, I can't do this, like yelling it in my car on the way. And I don't care about the people around all the time, but it helps me get in to my body and in there.
Yeah, Georgette reframed affirmations for me. Like, she completely like flipped the script. She was like, oh, you can use what if before the affirmation. And that's the only way I've been now able to even start dabbing into it, because otherwise I make Zanny's face, but to myself. I'm like, I am strong. I am so beautiful. Yeah, right. Like, I can't do it. Like, talking about, you know, having a relapse or having a blip, a blip experience, what would make you really think, oh, hang on, like, massive warning sign, I feel like this is going into a dangerous territory, like, I need, and what would you do?
I think for me, it would be if I started to notice that it was a pattern. So it wasn't just a one-off slip. It was actually, this is happening quite a lot and it's becoming problematic. And actually, it's not just an isolated incident. It's actually hindering my entire progress. And even though I've never had any professional support or intervention with my recovery, well, before or after, really, that would probably be the point where if it was happening, I would think, okay, this is where I need specialist intervention now. And touch wood, that hasn't happened. But I do always think if I was in a situation where, for example, I was indulging in risky behaviours that were genuinely risky rather than my adapted version of risky, then that would be the point where I would be like, okay, like, I have to just draw the line here because this is becoming really problematic.
What about you, Zanny, Mel?
I think what's hard about it is that I kind of had to think about what is the most dangerous thing for me. Extreme, prolonged experiences of despair and really intense negative emotion are, it's not like a sign that I'm having like a full-blown BPD time, but I think those are the things that are that I had to pay the closest attention to, because those have the highest chance of leading into the most dangerous behavior. So like if I'm grieving and I feel like I'm not able to get a break from my grief, or I'm upset about something and it feels like no matter what I do, I don't ever get a break from that feeling, that's when I have to really dial it back and go back to the basics and offload as many things as I can, so that I'm not putting myself in a position, because it's challenging when I feel like that. I sometimes, I try to do a lot of things to distract myself, but then I'm also putting myself in positions where I could be exposed to things where I'm making like more impulsive decisions. So it's definitely a balancing act. But I think it's just in those moments, it's going back to basics and just focusing on the bare minimum and making sure that I'm taking care of my body as well as I can so that my mind is well supported.
I definitely know my rock bottom. It scares me because I've thought about it a couple of times, but not because I just have to, so I can reflect like constantly, right? Mine is my sobriety, right? Because I'm 7 years sober from alcohol. So mine is just checking with the things that we've spoken about through this episode, because I have to know my limits. I have to know the things that help and hurt me, right? We can only do what we can only do if we're making sure that we're keeping up with the things that help us.
It just, when you were all talking, it made me think about something which I've honestly just haven't thought about linked to this question, is when I cross a bridge now, I don't think anything. I'm crossing a bridge, like I'm just walking. But at rock bottom, I was always thinking about jumping off the bridge every single time. And sometimes I stopped and I looked down and all of that. And now I just don't at all. And I just realized, like, literally now, which is just mind-blowing to me. So maybe that would be kind of a sign. And also the emptiness, I think. Like, if I feel nothing, then I start to think, ooh, what am I avoiding? Like, is there something brewing, like, that I need to look into?
Looking back over everything that's been said. I think one of the common themes is the fact that even if you do have these slip ups, even if you do feel like you are going backwards in recovery, you don't need to write off your recovery as a whole. Like, I think one of the biggest steps on our journey is learning resilience. And I think that that's really important, that when you do mess up, that you realize that that's human, and actually everyone needs to learn how to bounce back from things. And I think with borderline personality disorder, we do have such a tendency to be so harsh on ourselves and set ourselves sometimes unobtainably high standards in recovery, that actually maybe sometimes we just need to take a step back and evaluate how we're going about reaching those goals, and whether actually we are just being unnecessarily harsh on ourselves sometimes. And there is nothing apart from maybe certain crimes that is unforgivable. So if you do slip up in your recovery, it's perfectly fine to forgive yourself. Like, that's also a human thing to do. And I think when you've got BPD, you do tend to almost self-stigmatize and demonize yourself to the point where it makes you feel like you're not human. And it is really important to show yourself compassion as well.
Well said.
Yeah, I could not say it any better than that. Mic drop.
Well, thank you everyone so much for watching. We hope you got a nugget of wisdom to take with you on your journey. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you do not miss anything. And consider supporting us on Patreon for special behind the scenes and bonus content. We will be back next week for another brunch, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.